chapter 2, and we're going in at verse 8. This is, of course, brothers and sisters, the rebellion, remember, with Abner against David, and Ishbosheth being the puppet type king, as it were. Verse 1, and after this, it came to pass that David smote the Philistines and subdued them. 2 Samuel chapter 2, I'm sorry, where am I? Verse 8. But Abner, the son of Ner, captain of Saul's host, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. 2 camps. And if we had time, brothers and sisters, we could develop this very interesting situation. We have the camp of Saul and the camp of David. And this, as it were, from time to time, raises its head, doesn't it? In the context of God's people. And so, the 2 camps again, and lessons to be learnt for us. So, brothers and sisters, let's go back now to Genesis. And we're going in at a time in Jacob's life which there is much to learn. Remember how in Genesis chapter 32, his name was changed from Jacob to Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God. You see, this is the point, brothers and sisters. With God in your life, you will prevail. And if we forget everything else in my sessions, in the talks that I've been blessed and privileged to deliver, if you forget everything else, please remember that with God in your life, brother, sister, you will prevail. Did you notice something else about that transitional period in the life of Jacob? His whole life was spent in wrestling with God, wanting to do things his way. And in a few moments, that wrestling with God culminated, notice, with a clinging on to God. That's the subtle point, brothers and sisters. Verse 26, verse 25, he's wrestling with God. And he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. That's the point in a nutshell. He's learned from just merely struggling with God, wanting to do things his way and working things out in his own strength. And now he's holding on to the things of God, clinging to him. Now there's something extra which Hosea thankfully tells us. Just keep a marker in Genesis chapter 32 and go over please to Hosea. The divine record. Hosea chapter 12. Verse 3, he took his brother by the heel in the womb, and by his strength he had power with God. Yea, he had power over the angel and prevailed. He wept and made supplication unto him. Now then, Genesis adds that added extra. Hosea adds that added extra, which Genesis does not mention. When he's holding on to the angel, brothers and sisters, he's crying. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. And in that moment, his life is transformed to simply struggling with God, to allow God to have the upper hand in his life, to don't leave me. You couldn't get a greater contrast, could you? Don't leave me. Why? Because I need you to work things out for me in a way which only you know. Therefore, in his weakness, was he made strong. Therefore, brothers and sisters, he would overcome. He would have power with God. Why? And doesn't that ring true with all the faithful in Scripture? Only when they recognize, we know this is Sunday school stuff, only when they recognize their deep-seated yearning, their frailties, their inadequacies, their weaknesses, only then is it when God begins to build and to mold and to shape and to nurture and to encourage. And so out of weakness, they were made strong. They waxed valiant in fight. And the divine record, as Hosea sees it, adds an extra, you might say, a sensitivity that I'm going to suggest we lose in Genesis. Sisters, have you ever seen a grown man cry? Okay, you might say with the British reservedness, you might say, I class myself as British as well. A so-called British reservedness, a stiff upper lip. And yet when you read about these men, Esau, he cried, Hosea says. When he sees that the birthright, he cries about it. Well, now these men, Esau, he was a man's man. And Jacob cries. Maybe, brothers and sisters, that perhaps tells us a bit more about these men. The way they saw things, how they felt. Sometimes you can go to a Bible school and speak in front of 700, 800, 900 brothers and sisters. And sometimes you can feel the most loneliest person in the place. Not that I feel lonely here, I hasten to add. So please don't think that for a moment. Not for a moment, please. So let's really get down to our subject matter, please, brothers and sisters. Genesis and chapter 34. So we look at the life of this man, and as we said earlier, the problems and difficulties will come from time to time into all our lives. Because family life in the Lord is no easy life in the Lord. And so we come to verse 1, where the emotions of this chapter really are heightened. And there is much food for thought for us, brothers and sisters. So how do we understand this Dina? This girl in the midst of these brothers? How did it shape her character? How did it mold her? The infighting within the home, the divisiveness. A young girl, a young woman, a virgin, in the midst of all this. And one can only wonder how it might have affected her. All right, she goes out in verse 1. And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. Now one gets the impression, brothers and sisters, that in those days, a virgin would not be just going out maybe perhaps even fraternizing. She had her work to do. She had things to sort out in the household itself. Perhaps the brothers were doing other things, and maybe she, from time to time, felt very much at a loose end. Perhaps maybe there was no one in the home who she could really talk to. Well, yes, of course, there was her mom, Leah, and yes, there was Rachel, and yes, there was Bilhah and Zilpah, but they weren't her age. One almost gets the impression that there was a desire to go out, to make more friends, to network, you might say. And the youngsters, you see them out here, it's lovely. It's part and parcel of young people. They need that. And yes, of course, in ecclesial life, it's vitally important, brothers and sisters, to have old and young to pool their resources together. It's not a us and them type of mentality, not at all. But there are times when young people are happy in their own company. Suffice to say how important it is, brothers and sisters, that in ecclesial life, the enthusiasm of youth must be coupled with the wisdom and experience of old age. However, not always is there wisdom with old age, neither is there inexperience with youth. Both have their part to play. So she goes out, but sometimes in Genesis, it is what isn't said that is important. There is no chaperone. Did you notice that? The verse leaves us fully understanding that she goes out. Did the home environment make her feel so constrained that she couldn't bring or invite someone home to talk to them about the covenants of promise? Was her family life so much that she wanted to go out just for respite and peace of mind? So she couldn't wait to get out of that home that was broken. Do you spend time talking to your children? Your grandchildren? And those who do not have children, please do not feel isolated when I say statements like that, because you also have your part to play. If you're honest about it, you do. And actually, you can do more as the young grow, more than what the parents have been trying to tell that young person for years, you notice. And they may listen to you more. Not having the commitments of children yourself, so please do not feel undervalued, sister. Never do that. So she goes out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her. Margin, humbled her. These are the issues, brothers and sisters, of life. This was a family who were to be custodians of the covenants of promise. And I get a distinct impression in reading it and rereading the lives of the patriarchs of old. It's as if then we have the fundamental principles of the Abrahamic covenants of promise, but side by side, running parallel, yes, parallel, are the trials and issues of life. And actually, I think what these verses are saying to us is simply this. If we believe the covenants of promise, how much are they impacting upon our lives? How do they cause us to live our lives? What attitude do we take when, not if, when these problems come? For as a community, we are not exempt with any one of those things that happened to Jacob in his life. Not any one of them. So how does he deal with these things? And as the verses unfold, brothers and sisters, I want you step by step, please, to see how he's changed. Oh yes, he's an old man, well into his 90s now. He's an old man. And how has it shaped him? So verse 2, he defiles her. And his soul clave unto Dina, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel and spake kindly unto the damsel. Did you notice how verse 2 gives that picture of a very sudden, he lay with her, he saw her, he took her, he lay with her and defiled her. It was sort of a quick thing. And then the next verse allows you to look a little closer. And then maybe use your imaginations as to what may well have happened. So, verse 3, and his soul clave unto Dina. It's the word to cleave, to stick, to adhere, from whence comes the word adhesive, to take to. And he loved her. His soul clave unto Dina, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel and spake kindly unto the damsel. She's seduced. This virgin, confused. This man. Now, did you notice and when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country. So this young man was from royal stock. He could have had any girl in the province. You think about that. Well, she looked different. Her personality was perhaps not like the girls in these parts. And he took her. And he defiled her. And all the horrors of that invoked within Jacob and the family, particularly brothers. Our fourth one is a girl. And the amount of brothers and sisters that say to us, well, she'll be all right, she got 3 brothers. And so these men hear of this. Now look what it says. He spake kindly unto the damsel. Just a couple of references. In the margin for kindly, it's to the heart of the damsel. He spake to her heart. Now, mothers in the audience who have teenage girls, you might like to have this in mind. Be wary of those young men who speak to your heart, who tell you everything you want to hear. Oh, I look lovely, don't I? Not me personally, but the one who speaks to the heart. The gentle deception. The chat-up phrase, the chat-up line. Sisters who are mothers. Sisters who are grandmothers and see those lovely young girls who are just springing up, sometimes overnight it seems. Do you encourage them to talk to you about the partner that they will choose by the grace of God for the rest of their lives? Do you spend that time with them to getting to know them? Do you drop the odd phrase in, such as, well, you know, Jenny or Sue, has he got a well-worn Bible? How does he talk to his mom? Does he respect you? Is he a gentleman? Does he want to spend too much time with you alone? Does he do his Bible readings? Perhaps, brothers and sisters, as a community, we need to be doing more along those lines. To inculcate in the minds of our young people the absolute, how essential it is to get those things right in our priority, and not necessarily automatically assume that to be married is the most important thing in the world. It's not. That's how the Apostle Paul. But if these blessings come, then they know, and we have equipped them what choices to make, so that they might make prayerful, informed decisions best they can. Just a couple of references. 2 Chronicles, please, brothers and sisters. And chapter 32. And verse 6, Hezekiah, when these Assyrians are ready to come, brothers and sisters, 185,000 of them. Verse 6, and he set captains of war over the people and gathered them together to him in the street of the gate of the city and spake comfortably to them, saying, be strong. He spake, margin, to their heart. Whilst we're in the vicinity, just go back a page or two to 2 Chronicles chapter 30 and verse 22. Hezekiah was good at speaking to the heart, brothers and sisters. And Hezekiah spake comfortably unto all the Levites. Margin, he spoke to the heart. It's all about speaking to the heart. And in ecclesial problems and sometimes challenges, we do well to remember that. To speak to their heart. Nothing a mechanical sort of, well, we haven't seen you for 6 months. Here's a letter. Get back here now. Speak to their heart. Hezekiah did it. Encouraging, nurturing, seeking out, doing all that we can, best we can by the grace of God, to speak to their heart. And on whatever level, whether we have children or grandchildren or work at a Sunday school, we do that, don't we? We speak to their hearts. We reason with them. We try and show them the right way. And we take it from there. Genesis chapter 50 and verse 21. It's there again, isn't it, brothers and sisters? This time, interestingly enough, in the life of Joseph. Genesis chapter 50 and verse 21. You know, when Jacob's dead, the brothers are worried, aren't they? Now, therefore, fear ye not, verse 21 of chapter 50 of Genesis. I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. He spoke to their hearts. He appealed to their hearts. Genesis chapter 34. And Shechem spake unto his father Hamor, saying, Get me this damsel to wife. And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dina his daughter. Now his sons were with his cattle in the field. Rather an ironic verse, don't you think, in the end of that verse? Here now we see the very seeds of a patient man. Yes, of course, he was much older in years. He didn't have the vitality, the strength, the energy, the wherewithal to summons his sons. And as the years go by, he, as it were, they would increase and he would decrease. They would then have to take on the roles and responsibilities of the family, of the home. They would have to make decisions best suited for the family. And Jacob knew that. For they were to be the custodians of the Abrahamic promises, the covenants of promise, and they would have to take it to the next generation. And so he waits. A man who in his early years, formative years, he was all about doing. And now he can only wait on others to do. Within ecclesial life, brothers and sisters, I think it's absolutely essential to ensure that our young brethren particularly are given those tools necessary through reading and Bible study and example to pass on those things that they have to the next generation. And he held his peace until they were come. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out unto Jacob to commune with him. And the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they heard it. And when the men were grieved. Such a strong word. They were grieved and were very wroth, because he had wrought folly in Israel in line with Jacob's daughter, which things ought not to be done. And Hamor communed with them, saying, The soul of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray you give her him to wife. So let's enter into the household, into the minds, into the thoughts of others. Let's start with Jacob. Perhaps Jacob might have blamed himself. If only. Perhaps Jacob might have blamed himself in the sense that he had allowed his daughter to go. To make that friendship. To see the daughters of the land. And what about her mother? And the experience that her daughter had gone through in that sexual act would have touched her mother in ways that could never touch her father. And how would she feel? And maybe for a few moments, brothers and sisters, for a few hours or a few days, maybe they might look upon themselves as a family. Maybe you've done that from time to time when there's a problem in the home and all of a sudden something just erupts. And then that actually, when all the dust settles, you begin to look at yourselves, don't you? So why did they do that? Well, I don't know. Maybe we're too harsh with them. Maybe we don't know. But we can only do what we feel is right in light of Scripture. We can see the reactions of her brothers. Certainly her full-blood brothers. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Oh yes. And that's typical of young men. And so he communes. They want to join. Now we need to look for this underlying thing which we need to bring to the fore. And so we ask the question and we make the connection. Here then is a Gentile, right? You know where I'm going with this. Here is a Gentile who wants to come under the umbrella of these people, line of Abraham. The chapter says, notice well, brothers and sisters, how this man, this young man, he was an honorable man. All right, we could debate that. Suffice to say, I get the distinct impression by reading this chapter over scores of times. You get the impression that this young man wants to make amends. He wants to put it right. How far to take that is for another time. Suffice to say, he wants to put it right. Now look at verse 13. And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem. And then straight away we see the transition in the chapter. Straight away we see now Jacob waiting for his sons to come out the field. And then he's standing back and he's watching and he's listening carefully. This wise man filled with experience of life, being through the university of life, he just stands back and waits and listens and observes. And the brothers jump in. And they hatch a plan, you see. Yes, get them circumcised, and we know the chapter well. On the third day, when these men are incapacitated, they couldn't fight. Now just think then. Shechem and Hamor spend time in convincing the people about being circumcised. Well, yes, of course, it's very much bolted on to this, gain. Their daughter will be our daughters and their cattle will be our cattle, and we'll get on great. There's no hint of, we understand the covenants of promise, so we want to be part of it. Not at all. Be that as it may, brothers and sisters, it must have taken some thought and some debate and some discussion to persuade all the men, no matter what age, to be circumcised. All of them in the city. So they didn't take it lightly. That's for sure. They could see, and actually, is that not a mirror as to what would take place in the Mosaic law? How other people would see, should see the example, but that it fails miserably in this chapter, doesn't it? We know it. Suffice to say, they joined themselves to Jacob's family. Did you notice how, because there is now this issue, this problem, all of a sudden, Jacob's sons become a sort of self-righteous type of family. Did you notice that? Oh, well, actually, verse 14. And they said unto them, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised. Well, did the Apostle Paul write, brothers and sisters, and show that we must be circumcised in heart. For that were a reproach unto us. So the young men, most of them well into middle age by now. Verse 19. Verse 18, so they go and discuss it, and their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. And the young man deferred not to do the thing because he had delight in Jacob's daughter. And I don't think it's that carnal, physical delight. I think he loved her. And he was more honorable than all the house of his father. And Hamor and Shechem, his son, came unto the gate of their city and communed with the men of their city, saying, these men are peaceable with us, therefore let them dwell in the land. Verse 22, only herein will the men consent unto us for to dwell with us, to be one people, if every male among us be circumcised as they are circumcised. And they all do it. Verse 25. And it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dina's brethren, took each man his sword and came upon the city boldly and slew all the males. A city. In Genesis 49, brothers and sisters, we know that Jacob says, Simeon and Levi, instruments of cruelty. In fact, just go over a few pages. Let's just make sure that we home in on those particular verses and see the type of language he uses. Genesis chapter 49, verse 5, instruments of cruelty. Their swords, margin, were weapons of violence. Verse 6, anger. Verse 7, anger. Verse 7, fierce. Verse 7, wrath. Verse 7, cruel. Genesis 49, 34. Verse 26, verse 25. And came upon the city boldly and slew all the males. Now, have you ever really thought about what took place, brothers and sisters, here? Let's just remind ourselves, they were custodians of the truth. They understood, or they should have understood, God's mercy in calling Abraham and Isaac, now Jacob. And they go in. Now, because Jacob squarely condemns them, we know we're on the right track. Now, just think about these verses. When we said yesterday, let's bring into play now this idea of read a little and think a lot, and just get into what's happening here. And if you never thought about the implications, the ramifications as to verse by verse, let's do it together, please. And really see what's happening. And they slew Hamor, Shechem, his son, with the edge of the sword, and took Dina out of Shechem's house and went out. All right? So, with only 5 minutes to go, they go into the house. She's in the house with this man. They run him through with the sword. Oh yes. In front of her eyes. I have no doubt. There's cries. There's screams, there's tears. They kill his father. And then notice this. Verse 26. And they slew Hamor with Shechem, his sword, with the edge of the sword, and took Dina out of Shechem's house and went out. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and spoiled the city. Oh yes, it was a family affair. Because they had defiled their sister. There they are. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad and Asher, Issachar, Zebulun. They're all there, brothers and sisters. They came after to take the spoil. But hang on a minute. What a dysfunctional family. Do you really think that two men, no matter how skilled they were at cattle, could take their sheep and their oxen and their asses, which was in the city, and that which was in the field, and all their wealth, and all their little ones, and their wives, took they captive, and spoiled even all that was in the house? Do you think for a moment, brothers and sisters, it was just Simeon and Levi? They took the children. They took their wives. That man, Simeon, Levi, I stood as a wife to my husband, and you ran him through with the sword. And Jacob stands when he sees what's happening. He sees the absolute carnage. He sees the women and the children crying their eyes out, brothers and sisters. He sees a fire in the city. He sees all these cattle, all these sheep. And he stands, he's absolutely in dismay. And look what it says, verse 30. And Jacob said, whoa, finally Jacob said. Verse 13, look at that difference. And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem. Verse 30, and Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, ye have troubled me to make me to stink. I am absolutely sick of it. This division, this warring, this anger. I've just had enough. It's bad enough that your daughter, your sister, was sexually seduced. You just made it worse. You haven't helped me. And Jacob said to Simeon and to Levi, ye have troubled me to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites, among the Perizzites, and I being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house. And they said, should he deal with our sister as with an harlot? No chapter division, chapter 35, verse 1. And God said, isn't that exquisite, brothers? I just love. Jacob said, Simeon and Levi said, God said. Now, notice in chapter 35, what does God say? There's no psychiatric treatment. There's no rehabilitation program. There's nothing. What is the answer? What does God say, brothers and sisters, to Jacob and to his family to get him up? There's no explanation given. This is the answer, brothers and sisters. I know you're tired. He says, get back to Bethel. If you are going through problems and difficulties and worries and strains, you've got to get back. That's where the answer is. Get back to the things of God. If you're drifting from Bible class, going to the meeting, if you find it difficult to keep the family together, keep the home together, keep the ecclesia together, The only answer is getting back to the things of God. Get back to it. And when he goes to Bethel, that is when, brothers and sisters, the promises are reiterated. There it is, chapter 35. Go back. Verse 2. Put away the strange gods that are among you. They were idol worshippers as well. And let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress. That is the point, brother and sister. Get back to the things of God. Get back to Bible reading. Get back to prayer. Get back to getting to know your brothers and sisters. That is the answer. That is God's answer. And I dare say, brothers and sisters, not one of us in this room today have experienced all those things in your family. Oh yes, we hear about it in different families within the meeting. We know that well. But the only answer God gives Jacob is so simple, it is so profound. Get back to the things of God. So, brothers and sisters, do you know, if we had time, we could talk about the Hivites. We could talk about how in later years, they were the Gibeonites, actually, in Judges. I can prove it to you in scripture afterwards if you want me to. They came in eventually. Oh yes, they did. And when you go on further in the days of Saul, who wanted to destroy the Gibeonites, but they're still there. And then after the captivity in the days of Ezra and Nehemiah, they are the Nethinims. They're there. So they come in eventually. Oh yes, brothers and sisters. Let's get back to the things of God, shall we? Whatever it takes, sister, do it. Whatever it takes, brother, do it. Just get back.